Hey everybody, it's Taylor with Boydston Grove, and today we're going to show you 5 different projects that you can batch out for this Christmas. Let's get into it.
Let's get the party started.
Let's get the party started.
Alright, it's that time again.
Christmas time!
Time to start batching out those Christmas projects for markets, craft sales, gifts, or just to have around your own home. Now I'm going to be moving kind of fast here because we're going to be making 5 different projects and a couple different versions of a few of them. So let's buckle up and get started.
Hold on to your butts.
The first project is going to be some lawn ornaments. I'm using a piece of 1.5 inch plywood for mine and tracing out some really big circles. I used a level to make some lines and then used my little Hichika circular saw to score the lines, only going about 1/8 inch deep. I have a full review on this little saw. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now the idea behind this technique is to make the ornaments look like it's a bunch of boards put together, kind of like how I made the pumpkin yard ornaments this fall, but without actually having a bunch of boards put together. Once the lines were scored, I used the jigsaw to cut the ornaments out. I used some gold craft paint from Hobby Lobby to paint the tops. This paint is great. It has a lot of gold pigment in it and it covers really well. It was around this time that I realized I forgot a crucial part of the ornament, so I traced out some circles and cut out the shapes. You can just attach stakes on the back like I did on the pumpkins, but I decided to make mine so that they could be used without the stakes if I wanted. I split a board down the middle at a 45-degree angle. Then I cut 45-degree angles on 2 sides of another board. Using the board with the 2 angles for my spacing, I attached the 2 halves of the first board to the back of the ornaments. That way I can slide the ornaments on and off of the stakes so that we can use them on the porch or around the fireplace if we want. I also attached those rings that I had forgotten. As an afterthought, I used the Ray 5 laser to cut out some lettering, painted it, and attached it to the front of one of the ornaments. Project number 2 is going to be a couple of sleighs. For sleigh number 1, I drew up a design on Photoshop, and for the sake of time, I cut it out using some 3mm basswood on my longer Ray 5 laser engraver, but you could just as easily cut it out with a scroll saw. These designs for the sleighs are available on our website if you want to make one for yourself. With the pieces cut out, I assembled them using glue and 23-gauge pin nails. I spray painted the whole thing red and then taped everything off to spray paint the rails black. In hindsight, this would have been way easier if I had spray painted all the pieces before assembly.
Well, live and learn. At least we lived.
Alright, somewhere along the line, I lost the footage for the next couple steps of this little sleigh, so let me go over them real quick. I decided I wanted a little trim around the edges, so I cut one out on the laser, and I will make sure to add that piece of trim into the template. As far as the lettering goes, I actually found that on some cutouts that came in a pack of 2 from Hobby Lobby for like $1 something, so I just cut out the lettering, painted it, and glued it on. For sleigh number 2, I used the same design and I just resized it to be a little smaller. Instead of creating a box like the first one, I cut a piece of 2x4 to use as the center of the sleigh. I cut a small rabbet on each side of the 2x4 that the sleigh rails can sit in. Then I used a 1.5 inch Forstner bit to drill 2 holes about 1/2 inch deep. This time I had the forethought to pre-paint the pieces. Those rabbets allow the rails to sit flush with the side of the 2x4 so that the side of the sleigh can sit perfectly flat. For this sleigh, I just used some gold Sharpies to add a few details. Project number 3 was inspired by the Christmas moose that we made last year. I created a template and traced the body and feet onto a 3/4 inch thick piece of pine board, and then traced the rest of the pieces onto a piece of 1/4 inch thick plywood. After cutting the board to more manageable sizes, I cut everything out on the scroll saw. After sanding everything down, I spray painted the bodies black and the little hats red. Then I retraced my lines to be able to paint in the white. I hot glued the rest of the small pieces onto some skewers so that they would be much easier to hold while painting. Once all the pieces were dry, I added some details with some Sharpies and then assembled everything with super glue and nails. I almost forgot to paint the little signs. Project number 4 are some Christmas gnomes. I'm using a 2x10 for my gnomes, setting my miter saw to 15 degrees and cutting little wedges just like we did with the candy corns. Now you don't have to use a board as wide as what I'm using, but keep in mind that the width of your board will determine the height of your gnomes, and I wanted to make sure that my gnomes had really high pointy hats. Most of the designs I've seen stop right here with the triangles, but I decided to add a little bit more shape by cutting off each side to be straight and then cutting the bottom corners to 45 degrees. I sanded them and rounded over all the edges and corners. As you can see, I batched out quite a few. After painting them all 3 different colors, I taped off the lower portions of each and painted the top halves different colors also. Once those were dry, I used some white paint to add some details to the hats of each gnome. I wanted to add a few more details, so I cut out some small ovals to use as shoes, and I also cut up some of these wooden beads we had as well. For the noses, I took some wooden beads and sanded one side so it would sit flat, and I used some small dowels to fill all the holes. I'll leave links to all the beads I'm using in the description below. Super glue is plenty strong enough to hold these little pieces on. Alright, we can't forget the most important part of gnomes, which are the beards. Now, you can get faux fur at just about any store, even Walmart, but it's kind of pricey. So I decided to swing by my local Goodwill. And I picked up a bunch of these. These are some really furry pillows and a little furry rug that I got at Goodwill. All of it was just a couple bucks. Yes, I did wash them. All that's left to do is disassemble them and cut them into little beards. After disassembling the pillows and cutting out some little beards, it was time for assembly. Project number 5 is a Christmas countdown calendar. I started by cutting a piece of a 4x4 into 2 square blocks. I took a piece of a 2x4 and cut some 1/4 inch thick strips. I also cut a piece of 3/4 inch pine board to 7 1/8 inches by 3 5/8 inches. I assembled it all with glue and pin nails. Then I spray painted the blocks white. These little Christmas countdowns are becoming increasingly popular, and there's so many varieties at places like Hobby Lobby with so many different backgrounds to choose from. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice if you could just have one Christmas countdown and then swap out the backgrounds? So that's what we're going to do with ours. I cut a 1/2 inch piece of plywood to 7 inches by 12 inches. Then I sketched out a design and cut it out with the jigsaw. After sanding it down, I started to paint. I traced and painted the little phrase on the front of the holder, and I also traced and painted the letters on the blocks. Here's a quick look at the numbers for each block. Got it? Good. I drilled out some spots in the back of the little block holder and glued in some rare earth magnets. Once the background was dry, I drilled out some spots that were just deep enough to recess some washers, making sure that they were in line with the magnets on the block holder. Alright, our first big batch of Christmas projects for this year is complete, and it was a lot. So for those of you that made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I was positive from the get-go that these little penguins were going to be my all-time favorite. But once I started gluing faux fur on these little gnomes, man, I got swayed pretty quick. I know I made 3 penguins, but you could just make 1 and put the full phrase on one little sign, and I have a full set of templates for that on our website, so I'll leave the link to them in the description below. I also have a full set of templates for the sleighs if you want to build those for yourself. I have to say that the calendar countdown was my least favorite when I came up with the idea, but once I executed it and now I can swap out the signs, I really like it because now I can just continue to make signs every year and change it up. All of these projects were pretty simple and I was able to knock them out pretty... Are y'all listening to me or are y'all looking at all the gnomes? Eyes up here, people. Since everybody's focused on the gnomes anyway, let's go over those real quick because out of all the projects, the gnomes are the only ones that require constant upkeep throughout the Christmas season because you want to make sure that your gnomes are looking pretty good throughout the entire holiday season. You know what I'm saying? But on a not so much more serious note, once I made these gnomes, I changed my office forever because when you start cutting up faux fur, it gets everywhere. Let me know in the comments below which one of these is your favorite. Projects, not gnomes. Thank you very much for watching. Be safe and have a great day.